Hello, everyone. My name is Justin Crowley,
And I'm Mike Smith.
and this is The Murder Project. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 49 of The Murder Project. In this episode, we are going to be doing the debrief on the Jessica Johnson case. This is the case that we started last week where we're trying to figure out, is this a murder mystery or is this a suicide? If you're new to the podcast, which there are a lot of people that are now, the debrief is an episode where I sit down with my good friend and former police officer, Mike Smith, to discuss the cases further. In the debrief, we discuss the cases from both sides of the aisle, theories that we might have, and anything we think needs a second look. The debrief is an unscripted and off-the-cuff commentary about the cases that we are currently covering. The hope of the debrief is to break the case down further, but in a relaxed environment with the true crime we love, but also some laughter. So, let's get the episode started. Mike Smith in the house.
Hey, what's up?
What's going on, man?
It's a fine day here in Amarillo, Texas.
It sure is.
It's nice out, lots of overcast, pretty warm.
Yeah, it's getting warm. And I'll tell you, I shortened the intro because we got a lot to get to in this one.
We do, yeah.
And
it's a very interesting case because sure, it looks one way, and obviously a lot of people bought into that. But the more you look, the more you're like, wait a sec, none of this really does make sense.
Yeah, there's a lot of things in here that seem a little weird. But before we get the episode started, I just want to thank everybody that went on to Apple, Spotify, whatever platform you're listening on, gave us a like, subscribed to the show, left us a review. I'll read some of those reviews at the end of the podcast. I do appreciate everyone that did that. If you haven't done that yet, please jump over there and do that. And it really helps us out. If you're listening on Apple, subscribe to the show, give us a 5-star review, and then leave a review, leave us a comment, say something about the show. You could even put in what episode you started listening at, just something that says, hey, we're here, we're listening. Also on Spotify, I noticed that they made it able to where you can give shows a 4-star review, whatever star review. I didn't know that they did that. I only listened to a couple episodes on Spotify, or a couple of podcasts on Spotify. But I noticed the other day, I looked on there, I was like, oh, wow, you can actually leave. So if you're listening on Spotify and you haven't done it already, right under the name of the show, it'll tell you what the star rating is so far. Just tap that. As long as you've listened to, I believe, at least 30 or 45 seconds of an episode, you can tap that and then leave us a 5-star rating right there.
That sounds like a great plan.
Yeah.
5 stars all the way.
5 stars all the way around.
Let's get it.
Yeah, let's do it. All right. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into this case because like we discussed, it's got a lot of different things that are happening, a lot of different moving parts and pieces, and then several different conclusions that a lot of people have come to. And more specifically, I think that there's a lot of people that are caught between, is this a murder or is this a suicide? And what does the evidence point to? Because there's a lot of buzz on the internet, which I read in the Reddit posts, and then, a lot of different comments and things that were posted on different sites. And the majority of the people out there are kind of pointed in the direction that this is a murder.
Yeah.
And so we really want to break it down. And y'all know how we do it on here. And I referenced this in the last episode because we're going to look at it from both sides. We're going to talk about how this thing could have been a murder. We're also going to talk about how this could have been a suicide. And when it's all said and done, we'll see where we end up.
Yeah, I do have a theory, and I'll be talking about it in detail. I thought of a way that this could have gone down where at the end, people involved could literally act like, I didn't do it.
Yeah.
Because in their mind, they think they didn't.
Perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm excited to hear that theory because I haven't heard it yet. One of the good things about this show is whenever we're kind of bringing things to light in front of the other person that we haven't heard yet. That's natural reactions. I love it. All right. So I think that for the majority of the people, they listen to the part 1 episode.
Yeah.
So I don't want to go back through and go through that whole timeline again, because really, if you think about it, that those last couple of days are, yes, the most crucial as far as everything goes, but it's really that last night.
That's right.
That last night, starting, in my opinion, when Jessica calls her friend and tells her that her and Garland are having problems, and she wants her to come pick her up at the friend's house, quote unquote.
Right. Yeah. This person's name that I could not find.
Yeah, mystery friend. I think I heard his name in one of the documentaries that shows that I watched, but then I went back and tried to look at it, and I was like, man, I'm gonna have to listen to this whole 1 hour thing to see if I can find it. So there's a friend of Garland's whose house that they're kind of staying at, that they're partying at, that they're doing some things at that are still up in the air.
Yeah, Garland was known to stay there on occasion, I believe.
Yeah, and that's another thing about, we just covered a case about this, and sometimes I like to kind of run them together so that we have reference points that are fresh. But when we're talking about kind of the drug scene crowd, and if you watched any of those videos that showed Garland before he was going into court to face a charge against the girl who gave him an alibi for this specific case because he assaulted her too.
That's right.
Which is, should tell you at least something about the guy.
Yeah. During this whole investigation, he had a warrant out for his arrest, or in the process of being put out for his arrest for assault causing bodily harm.
Yeah. For a different woman, the woman that gave him the alibi. And so, but if you go back and you watch that video and you see his mannerisms, the way that he talks, the way that he moves, he reminds me of kind of a crackhead, very erratic, moving a lot. The sentences are kind of
hyperverbal.
Yes.
Lots of body movement, lots of eye contact, lots of darting eyes when he's talking, looking around.
Mm-hmm.
Not a lot of sustained eye contact.
No, lots of body movement. I mean, I talk a lot with my hands. That's why you constantly hear me hitting my microphone in the podcast. But this kind of takes it to a different level.
It does, yeah.
And I mean, if you think about it, if you've ever seen that, that type of just constant movement and how kind of erratic it looks, where you're just like, dude, we're just having a casual conversation. Why are you moving that much?
We're just talking, yeah.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, he is eventually, recorded saying that he would never hurt her.
Yes.
Which is ironic.
Because we know, based on the accounts of other people, multiple other people.
And the fact that he was going to court for, to face charges for doing exactly what he said he wouldn't do, albeit to another person.
Right.
But did he not care about her too? I don't know.
Yeah, who knows? But I'll tell you this, that's a good point. The fact that he says that he would never hurt her, even though he's literally walking into a courthouse to face charges for assaulting another woman. And there were multiple sources that said that he was both physically and mentally abusive, verbally abusive to Jessica, that they seen it with my own eyes. They're talking like, I saw that happen, that he was physically and verbally abusive towards her. So, I mean, that doesn't give him a whole lot of credit. But then also we have to look at the fact that the cops really didn't look into him a whole lot. And that's one of the things that I want to talk about in this episode, maybe why the investigation went that way, why there wasn't a whole lot of conversation between them, just to kind of get on the same page with everybody about maybe the ins and outs of that, how that might have happened. Was it sloppy police work, or were they just going off of what they had, the information that they had? It looks a little sloppy.
It does.
I'm not going to lie.
I definitely get the vibe that they didn't put a lot of effort into it because she was a known drug user.
That is true. And
it acting like that doesn't happen is just ridiculous to me.
Yeah.
Because it does happen. Is it okay? No. Does it happen? Yes. If somebody has a long history of drug use, the way that you look at a case involving them is very different than you would, say, like a normal person, average person.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're exactly right. We would hope that something like that doesn't happen, but it does. And especially with people like you mentioned, with known drug histories, with known arrests, and it kind of might have been something that was looked at like, oh, well, it's just kind of people living in that drug life, and these are the kind of things that happen. These are the consequences of your actions. Mm-hmm. This is what happens. So I don't want to get too far ahead into all that. We'll kind of touch on all that as we go. But I think it's important to start out, in my opinion, the night before. So in that neighborhood of June 1st.
That's right.
And you have Jessica, who has been hanging out with Garland for a couple of days at this point. And supposedly they had gone and run some errands together. They had gone to a thrift shop to look for Garland some clothes. I think that thrift shop part will come in later when we're talking about the clothes of Jessica and things, right, like some some kind of theories that go in with that. But for some reason, the night that Jessica dies or the night before leading into the morning of, she is over at Garland's friend's house and there's some sort of party going on, whatever the activity is that's happening. And there is a altercation between I believe, altercation between Jessica and Garland to the point where she has to call her friend and say, things are not going well. Is there any way you can come pick me up?
Yeah, come get me out of here.
And so the friend does that. She shows up over to the house. And the way that she kind of talks about it in the interview that she gave was that she said that it was not a place you would want to be at. It's not a place you want to hang out at. And so to me, that was kind of like, okay, it's probably maybe a party house. There's probably a lot of drug use. There's probably a lot of things happening there or discussions happening there that might make the average person uneasy, because in the drug life, you're also talking about a lot of criminal activity.
That's right. Yeah. And a lot of different personalities going on depending on their level of drug intoxication.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they could be tense. They could be angry because they're not, lit up yet, anything like that. Yeah. It gets a place where unless everything's going well, you have no idea what kind of mood you're walking into.
Yep. Or a lot of potential reckless behavior,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people making irrational decisions, all of the things that kind of go in with that. And if you're just the average Joe or Jane walking into a house like that and you have really no experience with that, I can see how it'd be really unsettling.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was unsettling for me when I'd go into some place where you're like, whoa, what's been going on here? Or B, how do you guys live like this?
Yeah. Just mattresses on the floor, piles of clothes, food, blown out furniture. It's like every couch was just crushed in the middle.
Yeah. Just trash everywhere, or a bunch of electronic parts. Like you can tell when you had like a real tweaker house, when just all the electronics were just taken apart.
Yes.
And then they try to put it back together and they lose interest somewhere in there. And it's kind of strange. But
yeah.
Anywho, as Jessica's friend is trying to tell her like, hey, I've come over to the house to pick you up, so why don't we leave?
Right.
Something has happened in between that time it takes her to get there, that Jessica now decides that she is going to stay. And so the friend is saying, well, I was trying to convince her to leave, and they believed that the altercation that took place between Jessica and Garland may have been because of other women at the house, maybe either expressing interest in him or him expressing interest in other women, however that might work out.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really think that particular detail is important. We just know that it caused someone to be upset. Therefore, there was an argument or something that happened. And I think that's really the moment that kind of kickstarts this whole thing.
Right. Yeah. But in the end, she doesn't leave.
No, I don't think. And that's one of the things that I was thinking about in this whole deal, where everybody's talking about leaving and not being there, not being present. But somehow she's the only one that ends up being in that area. Very convenient if you're trying to avoid any sort of charges.
It is very convenient.
So after this all kind of takes place, the friend leaves. And according to some of the witnesses, and this is where it's hard for us to really give you a detailed timeline, because everybody's just not sure about a lot. And when you get into things like this, if you have people who run into police officers often, law enforcement officials of any kind, they don't really like to talk to cops either way.
No, it's always vagaries.
Yeah.
They never have a single detail pinned down.
Yep.
It's always the other day, a couple hours ago. They never know the name of the people they're hanging out with. It's always some weird street name or just a name, but no other details.
Yeah. I don't really know him. I haven't really been hanging out with him that long.
Yeah. How many people you run into on the street that you're trying to investigate that they have a significant other that they know nothing about but their name?
Yeah. And in this case here, the difference you have, whereas on the Holly Bobo case, there were people that were kind of jockeying for positions because they were suspected of committing a crime.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in this one, they are not being suspected of committing any crimes. So saying that they're speaking very vaguely about a lot of stuff is because they don't have to try to formulate a plan to get out of whatever they're in.
Right.
They're just saying like, man, this is a tragedy. This is a suicide. And we just kind of need to know where everybody was at. And they're like, well, we were hanging out at the house. And we were partying a little bit, and then we all left, and we're not really sure what happened to Jessica. And they're like, oh.
Yeah. What time did you leave? They're like, man, I don't know. It was sometime between 10 p.m. and this morning.
Mm-hmm. I wasn't looking at my watch,
No
wasn't
big deal.
wasn't really paying attention. I do have an alibi, though.
Mm-hmm.
You can go ask this girl over here. I was gone.
Yep. I was totally out of here.
And because the investigation was ruled as a suicide from the get-go, there was no real need, I suppose you could say,
Mhm.
there was no real need for the cops to dig in any further because it had already been ruled a suicide. So to them, they're kind of like, maybe this is a lot of time wasted going and getting these backstories. I would not feel that way. I would feel like everybody should be interviewed properly.
That's right.
And everybody should be nailed down to some sort of timeline so that you can go back and kind of check everything and make sure it checks out. I don't know if that was done or not. It appears that it was not. So
No.
to me, the time in establishing a timeline on this specific case is really hard because we just don't have the answers to that.
Right. Yeah. All we know is that there was a party. Some people were there. The friend came, tried to bail her out. She didn't go with her. And then she's found the next morning.
Mm-hmm.
But they believed that the time of death was around 3:30 a.m.
Right, because they noticed that she had sent a text message to her oldest son saying that she was going to spend the rest of the evening with G and that she would be home the following day or soon. And the reason I kept saying soon in the last episode is because in a lot of the research I did, that is the exact word they used. They used soon.
Right.
As kind of quoting what she said through, third party quote, I guess you could say.
Yeah. And that gives you a great piece of insight. Those aren't saying that you're going to see someone again is generally not a sign of suicide.
Mm-hmm. Not even if it would be like one of those things where if it was the last text message that was sent out, maybe it would be something on the kind of idea of, I love you a whole lot.
Mhm.
You're going to do great things, kid, or, something.
Yeah.
Not like, hey, I'll see you tomorrow.
Exactly. Yeah. I'll see you soon. It definitely give me the idea if you were going to commit suicide, just with what true crime knowledge I have, you would say something like, I've always loved you a great deal. I'll see you again someday.
Mm-hmm.
Or something more like that.
Yeah. See you on the side of the old Rainbow Bridge.
Exactly.
Yeah. Just something that would be there.
Nothing that implies soon.
Yeah. Which is also a little strange because I hadn't thought about this until we were chatting here. But in my opinion, if that final text message from Jessica was talking about her still hanging out with G,
Right.
which we would assume is Garland.
Right.
I mean, we can at least make that assumption and be correct that she was saying that. How do we get to the point where that detail right there is overlooked in the way of, well, at 3:29, she's saying that she's still hanging out with G.
Right.
But OG is saying that he's at another woman's house.
That's right.
Why is that connection not explored a little bit more in the way of, well, you're saying that you were at this other girl's house all night, but before she quote unquote committed suicide, she's saying that at this time she's still hanging out with you. And if you also look at it from the way of, if this is somebody setting up a fake text message to make it appear as though she is still alive, why would you include the people that potentially could be involved by way of, there's no way that she was hanging out with anybody else that night. Everybody knows, they say that they saw her there. So if you were trying to set up some sort of a timeline saying that, okay, if she was killed at 1:00 in the morning, and then they're trying to set this all up, they're trying to make it look like it's later than it is. That way you can set up your alibi. You can kind of get all your stuff going, get it all kind of wrapped up, tied down. Let's get everybody out of here. Let's get the house semi cleaned up, and then everybody needs to split.
Right.
But if that was the case, then you would have just put the person that potentially could have killed her right back in the picture.
That's exactly what it did in that case.
Which would be weird. But also we have to assume that this was a well thought out plan, which, if it was indeed a murder, it at least made it past that. But in my opinion, it's not well thought out.
No, it definitely is one of those things. Like the next morning, he would have seen, during the investigation, he'd have found out that message was sent. And he's like, dude, but I said I was over there.
Yeah. And then he's like, but I thought we said that.
Yeah. That's what you told me to put, bro.
Yeah, he's like, no, I never said that. I told you just to send a text message, not to send a text message saying that she was hanging out with me, you idiot. And he's like, well, I just got a phone call and they said she committed suicide. And he's like, oh, well.
Even better than that, he's the one that sent it and didn't think it through.
Yeah.
And by he, I mean Garland.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So already right there, I feel like that was kind of I hadn't thought about that yet up until this point, but that already seems like a detail that was not very well thought out.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily for them, if that's the way that it went through, they didn't have to worry about that.
No, they didn't
have to worry about that little messy detail.
No, the situation seemed to take care of itself by whatever reason.
Reason question mark.
Yeah.
Whatever. Reason X.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we do know, let's say that there were other witnesses, or not, let's say, I know there were other witnesses that said that they saw Jessica at the house as well, people that were supposedly hanging out at this party. And there were some text messages that Jessica sent out saying that, kind of speaking in the I can't take this anymore kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people in her family kind of point to the fact that she was just talking about the toxic relationship between her and Garland. And other people say, well, that's her saying that she's about to end her life. But then you're totally overlooking the last text message she sent. So there's some conflict there. But one of the people that were at the party, a female, I believe, said that they saw her in a fit of rage, rip the shoelaces out of her shoes and say that she was going to commit suicide.
Right.
Which to me, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense based on the fact of, have you ever just tried to just rip your shoelaces out? I mean,
it's a lengthy process.
It's not something that happens in the course of, it would be one of those things where if you were for dramatic effect or comedic effect in a movie trying to make some sort of point, but then you're like, well, I'm just going to, and then the camera just sits there for 15 seconds.
Yeah.
And then that's just the first shoe.
Right.
And then they like go to grab, it's not a process that happens under 5 seconds, both shoes, no shoelaces, they're out.
Yeah, they don't just pull free. So I read that as well, and that she was seen like clutching them later, like holding them, like, I'll do it.
Yeah.
And you're like, what?
Yeah, that point, that little detail right there seemed like it was put in there specifically for the purpose of how she was found.
Which friend was saying this? Was this Garland's friend?
Yes, this was a friend of Garland's or a friend of his friend who owned the house that was supposedly at the party at the house while they were there. They said they saw her do this. Which seems to me like that was definitely, it's very convenient.
It is. It is a very convenient detail.
Because we also have to think about the fact that this is going to be, if you go off the people at the house, well, they left.
That's right.
So she took her shoelaces out of her shoes. And then multiple hours later, she then decided to fashion them into a noose and hang herself on a mailbox.
It's not even a noose, buddy.
No, it's just a
loop.
circle. It's a loop that's been kind of crossed figure eight and then looped over a post.
Yeah. It's, noose is giving it way too much credit.
Yeah. Way too much detail.
Mm-hmm.
And then also you get into how it was tied and all that, but we'll talk about that here in a minute. But that was the part for me where when I heard that detail about this person seeing Jessica take the shoelaces out of her shoes and make some sort of comment that she would kill herself, that she would do it. It just seemed very planned, very perfect, very, very much executed by the way of how this outcome kind of came out, like what the outcome was.
Right. And well, I'm not saying, I don't believe that there's a chance she might not have said that. People can say all manner of things when they want to come across as like dramatic or serious when they're upset. Things that you don't mean, things that are mean, things that are that just sound crazy.
Yeah. We've all done it. Everybody's done it.
Everyone's done it.
In a state of intoxication or not,
Right.
Depending on however that goes out. In a fit of rage or in a fit of desperation, panic, emotion, people say things that they don't mean. Could she have said something to somebody at some point that could have been looked at this way? Sure. Does that mean that she was going to necessarily act on it? Statistically, no.
No, that's right.
That would have not been the case. So I found it kind of ironic that that detail was there, especially with the ripping out of the shoelaces. Very specific. And then also potentially 6 hours before anything would have happened.
Exactly.
So why would you go ahead and do that and either A, not put your shoelaces back in, or B, why are you just walking around in a gravel area, in a dirt driveway? This is out in the country,
Mm-hmm.
kind of in a rural part of town where there's no telling what kind of debris, stickers, anything that's on the ground, but you're just not going to have your shoes on for 6 hours and nobody knows what's going on.
Yeah, nobody thinks that's weird.
Nobody has any knowledge of what she's been doing this entire time, because if you go off what Garland's friend said, everybody was at the house hanging out and then they left. So what did she do? Are we supposed to believe that she left the house in some way and then came back later as a kind of a way like, I'm going to do this right here so that when somebody comes home, they're the ones that have to find me?
Right.
I don't think I can get there either as far as that goes, because if you go off of what Jessica's mom said, her family and everybody, they said if Jessica was going to commit suicide, she would have never done it in this way.
That's right. Yeah, I think she even mentioned that she would have done it like overdosing and going out like in a Sleeping Beauty way, I think is what is similar to what she said.
That's exactly right. She said she had an addiction to Xanax. The family knew that she had an addiction to Xanax. And this kind of starts when she, starts dating this first guy back in the 2013 kind of time frame. And she is starting to get into the drug life. And it's like one of those things where you kind of eased into it. And, a lot of times people like this, guys like this in particular, this is kind of something that I wanted to touch on for the women who listen to the podcast, is that is especially younger or anybody for that matter, is that a lot of times guys like this guys in the drug life, they will target certain women.
Mm-hmm.
They will try to bring them into this lifestyle. They will start giving you certain drugs, kind of working you up to something that you can get addicted to, because once you get addicted to them, if they're the ones that's pushing the drugs, they're the drug dealer, they have them, you will have a need to return back to them.
That's right.
They always have you, quote unquote, on the hook.
It's just another form of control.
Yeah, exactly. And I saw this happen whenever I worked in law enforcement. It was a really sad deal. This is something that happens all over the place, and especially it can happen all over the place if it happened in this town. I saw it several different times, but what I would see is younger women, high school age, just out of high school, that are caught up and arrested, much like Jessica was with this other man when he was arrested with drugs, and then he was sent to prison and the charges were dropped against her, which makes me believe that she was riding in a car that no one took responsibility for the drugs. Everybody got charged with the crime.
That's right.
Later on, the person who was actually responsible for having the drugs either admitted to it or was found guilty of having those drugs, and then the charges were dismissed. But I saw this several times where these drug dealers, they would get these girls that were in high school or just out of high school, and they would get them hooked on meth or pills or something like that.
Both.
And they had a need to come back to them.
Right.
And you're sitting here looking at these guys and you're like, this is like a drug dealing, drugged out, nasty looking dude.
Mm-hmm.
Why are these women coming around him? And it is because of the drugs.
That's right.
It's because they got them. They would go to high school parties. I talked to one of the girls one time and I said, how did you guys even meet?
Mm-hmm.
And she said, oh, I met him at a party. And I said, what are you, 18, 19 years old? And she's like, yeah, I just graduated a few months ago.
Wow.
And I was like, what kind of party? We're talking about a high school party? And she's like, yeah, these guys would show up and, they sell to some people there. And then they start talking to us. And then, the next thing we knew, we were kind of dating. And I'm like, no, he got her hooked on drugs.
That's right.
And then she had to rely on him to get those drugs. And in this situation, we're talking about a 28, 30-year-old dude, if my memory serves me correct, 28, 30-year-old dude going to high school party, picking up chicks.
Yeah, it probably seemed like maybe a rebellious, maybe kind of wrong. He's probably got some tattoos, trashy or otherwise. Talks a big game, acting like he's out there, making his own way, self-made man. That's really cool.
Yeah.
He's wearing the best clothes he owns to go to I'm sure if they looked hard enough, he was always dressed in the same clothes at these parties.
Yeah, just the same outfit over and over and over.
That's right. Yeah, because he don't own much because his entire life revolves around pushing these dirty drugs.
Yeah. And the fact that he's a low level dealer and doesn't probably make much money.
That's right.
When it comes down to it. But yeah, the one thing I'll remember about that is that story. And then also that he had got her to tattoo his name across her stomach.
Classy.
And that was one of the deals where whenever the reason I figured that out is when I'm taking her name down and I'm asking about identifying information, markers, things like that, tattoos. Mm-hmm. She said, yeah, I have a tattoo right here. And it was his street name. And I was like, oh man, like what? And it was huge.
Oh,
I mean, it was massive. And I thought, man, that's one of those things where you don't think about where, you know, you have a high school party. And we grew up in really small towns. So I didn't really have the same type of thing happen. Like our high school parties were just literally high school kids.
That's right.
Hanging out.
Well, not always.
But, you know, you think about it in bigger towns where you're like, oh, you know, kids are going to be kids and they're going to experience life. You don't think of some 30-year-old predator.
That's right.
Showing up to your high school kids party and then saying like, hey, you want to try this? And then they're just hooked.
Mm-hmm.
They're hooked on it and it changes their whole life. It changes the whole outcome of their life. And it's a sad deal. So that was one of those things I wanted to kind of point out. Like, yeah, you got to watch out. You know, sometimes somebody's intentions may seem to be well, but they're the exact opposite of that.
Yeah, if your only common bonding experience with this person that you're interested in is illicit drug use, that's a sign.
Yeah, go ahead and just back on out of that one if you need to. And I really feel like maybe later on in her life, not 18, 19 years old, but this is what happened to Jessica. She met up with a guy that she thought was interesting, fun, adventurous, dangerous, like all of these whatever buzzwords you want to use.
Sure.
And what it turned out is that he was a drug dealer.
Yep.
And he got her addicted to drugs so that she would be reliant on him. And then when he went to prison, she found another guy that was exactly like that. And I don't want to I don't want to piss anybody off with this, but there's a lot of people that said that Jessica was really trying hard to perhaps change Garland, that she loved him so much that she was trying to help him.
It's very common.
It is very common. But one of the things we also have to look at is that could have been true.
Sure.
And I don't want to take anything away from Jessica because she is deceased and anything that happened to her, she did not deserve one way or the other.
No.
We also have to look at this from a reliance point.
Mm-hmm.
Did she rely on him for something? Was the need for her to continue this relationship with Garland perhaps not about saving him, but because she did have this addiction to drugs?
Right.
It's something that I definitely think you have to consider. I'm not saying that it could, two things can be true at the same time.
Absolutely.
She could have actually been trying to save him. She could have been saying to herself, I need to get off drugs. Garland needs to get off drugs. If we didn't have this in our lives, we could be a great couple. Things could be great.
Right.
I'm not saying that that's not a possibility, but we also have to look at the fact that, yes, she could have been there to save him, but yes, she also could have been there because she also had a need.
That's true.
She had a drug need.
And it's also a good chance that he's the kind of, these are the kind of people that will tell you whatever you want to hear.
Yeah.
To smooth out any conversation that they have. So maybe he's telling her, I want to get off drugs. I want to, be with you. I want to have us be happy and not have this looming over us. And that's what he said.
Yeah, you're right. He could have just been saying all of these. He'd be like, you know what? You're right. Mm-hmm. We do need to get cleaned up. And then you just push it to the next day.
That's right.
Tomorrow becomes tomorrow, infinity.
That's right.
And he had no intention on cleaning that up.
No. And I think it's mostly implied that he was also seeing somebody else at this time.
Yeah, it appears that way.
It does appear that way.
According to his alibi, it sure does look that he was also seeing other women. And so that adds to another level of this toxic relationship and her need and feeling of wanting to get out. But she had that thing, whatever that thing was, we've already discussed it. Whatever the need was to still be there with him, she still had it. She still felt it. And whatever the purpose, whatever the reason, it's not an excuse for what happened to her.
No, absolutely not.
No matter how you slice it, it's not. So moving on with the rest, kind of going into the night, we have we have this friend who talks about the outburst with the shoes, taking the shoelaces out, which I find a little sketch. But then you have this period of time where no one seems to know where she's at, but she does send out this final text message. And then moving on, it kind of goes radio silent as far as her communication with anybody goes. And we're moving into the next morning. At the next morning around 9 a.m.,
right,
the mail carrier is coming to deliver mail at the house, and it is a mailbox that is outside by the roadway. It's not close to the house. They said it was a few hundred feet, I believe is what they said. Let's just say 100 feet, 150 feet, just because from the house. So this mail carrier is going to stop in the roadway and deliver mail that way. One of the things I noticed about this particular mailbox is that it was a wooden post that, the mailbox was fixed to like a 4-inch by 4-inch wooden post.
Yeah.
And then you had, and then behind that was the ditch, the bar ditch, the drainage ditch, whatever you call it.
And about 3.5 feet of grass around that sucker.
There was really tall grass and a lot of,
and it was crooked.
Yeah.
Yeah, the mailbox post was crooked.
That was another thing that I'd like to talk about.
Just a detail.
Yeah, just that, because somebody asked, I believe in one of the deals I read, somebody asked, was it fixed in concrete? And we'll talk about that here in a little bit because I don't think it was. But the mail carrier drives up to the house, and when she goes to put the mail in the mailbox, she looks down, and Jessica is basically in a knelt down position.
Yeah.
With her left shoulder leaning up against the post. The shoelaces from her shoes are tied together, and they are in kind of a figure 8. It's looped around the top of the mailbox, and then it goes around her neck. And then where the lace where it goes around the right side of her neck, it goes up in an upward motion. It goes across her upper lip and under her nose,
right,
I believe. And so this mail carrier obviously freaks out, calls the police. And when she calls the police, she also calls another mail carrier that is on a close by route to ask that guy to come sit with her, I believe.
I mean, yeah, it's unnerving.
Yeah.
That part's not really that bizarre to me.
Yeah, that's why I pointed out in the first one, I don't think there was anything kind of nefarious going on there. I truly believe she did that from a place of comfort.
Absolutely. If it's the first time you've ever seen somebody you believe is deceased, it's unnerving.
Yeah, especially in the manner that she was found. I mean, if that happened to anybody, including me, I'd walk out there. It would freak me out.
I'd be like, whoa,
yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Now, the bad part about all of that is when the guy shows up, he starts rifling through her purse.
Right.
Because her purse is sitting kind of between her legs because she's in this knelt down position. From the picture, it looked like it was a little in front. In front of her legs. But anyways, it's in that area. Well, he goes through her purse because also in the picture, you can kind of see like a phone charger that's kind of hanging out the side.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, when the guy probably pulled the wallet out and stuff like that, things got moved around.
Yeah, he's trying to
find an
ID.
I mean, I figure he's like 2 hands open this thing, like rifling through there, trying to find the wallet. And that is one of those things I can't stress enough. Like, just don't do that.
Don't do that. No. I
don't think that guy meant to cause any disruption in the case or contaminate evidence or anything like that. I think she was coming from a place like, when the cops get here, I'm going to have her ID ready. That way they know who this is.
Sure.
I'm helping. I watched a few crime shows. I know they got to ID the person.
That's the first thing they're going to try to do. They're going to try to ID this victim. And 40 minutes later, they're going to find the killer.
Yeah, exactly. But a few commercial breaks in between, and then boom, we got our killer. So he goes through the purse, gets the ID out, basically puts his DNA on everything that's in there. Messes, as far as that goes, the process of that would be before anything was even happening, all of that would be photographed.
Right.
Before, so that you can actually see exactly the way that everything was. And then you're going to have a crime scene detective or technician that is then going to start processing that evidence, but it's never going to be just sticking your hands in there and rifling around in the bag.
Yeah, so that homeboy just signed up for DNA and fingerprints to the local law enforcement.
Yeah, or because he should have been. And we have that incident that takes place, and then when the cops get there, judging from the picture, it's like everybody just pulled straight up to the mailbox. There's a picture of the 2 mail carrier vehicles in front of the mailbox, and then you have the police vehicles that are pulled right up to that. And in my opinion, there should have been some sort of perimeter set.
Yeah, there should have definitely been a buffer.
Yeah, so that they can, And you could have even left the mail carrier vehicles there.
Sure.
And been like, hey, you guys are not going to be able to use these vehicles for some time until we get finished processing this whole crime scene.
That's right.
Because as we're getting here, these vehicles are here, they stay there.
Mm-hmm.
That way we can kind of figure out where everything is, where it goes, how it was, anything like that.
Right.
But the cops go ahead and they just pull right on up to the front and they get out. And from what I understand, kind of going through some of the notes, is it wasn't exactly a long period of time before they came to the conclusion that she committed suicide.
Right. Yeah.
And that kind of wrapped that whole deal up pretty quick. So in my opinion, this would have been one of those situations where perhaps you would have looked at some of the evidence, shot some photos, got some statements, called out the justice of the peace. This would be in Texas, but but they're the ones that come out and pronounce people dead.
That's right.
Give you the time of death, give you all that. They're also going to be the ones that order an autopsy, and especially where we live at. But after this was all said and done, there was a preliminary autopsy done, but there wasn't a complete autopsy done. So there, from what I feel like, from all kind of levels in law enforcement, you don't have anybody that believes otherwise.
Not right out the gate.
This is a suicide. I don't believe anything otherwise.
Yep. They're like, oh man, she's clearly got something around her neck.
Mm-hmm.
She killed herself.
She killed herself. Yeah, we got the same detective. He takes the drag off his thing. He's like, looks like we got ourselves a robbery.
This
and they're
is
like,
pretty open and shut to me, Alfred.
they're like, no. And then that was the robbery was last one. He's like, oh, good thing I didn't flick this cigarette. Hold on. Looks like we got ourselves a suicide, boys. And they're like, wrap it up. We're out of here. And
open and shut.
Open and shut case, Johnson. Yeah, it seems like that's the way that it went. It seems like it was very much somebody had the opinion of, and everybody went
Just
along
ran
with it. Or anybody that could have had any sort of authority on the actual crime scene. I know that there was a police officer that worked at that department, and after the incident took place, he later left the department, and he is currently helping the family and trying to figure out what happened to her. So not everybody at this police department believes that this was a suicide. I'm not saying that. What I am saying, though, is that in the most crucial parts of this investigation, it was ruled a suicide. So anything past that, any further details, any evidence, anything that you wanted to gather, we're already past that. We're there, and there's no way to go back and start over.
That's right.
What we have is what we have. And
right. Yeah. They did a preliminary autopsy. They got a drug screen.
Mm-hmm.
So they were able to find that she had methamphetamine and Xanax in her system, but not like overdose deadly levels.
Yeah. Not at a level that would cause death. And also, aside from obviously the ligature marks on her neck and them ruling this a suicide by hanging, she did not have any injuries on her body otherwise that would have contributed to her death.
Right.
So they're saying specifically for this case, the hanging was the cause of death, closed case.
Yep. Which is bizarre because in the pictures you can see that her left hand clearly has like a bunch of little injuries on it. Like a whole bunch of them. Like they look like little punctures to me. At first they look like burns to me.
Yeah.
And then I kind of spent some more time kind of eyeballing them, and they look more like little punctures to me.
Yeah, and the way that they described how these injuries might occur as far as the documents go is that I think they ruled this that it could have been from a gravel, like drug across gravel or something, fell in gravel, some gravel.
Fell, maybe.
Yeah.
But what her hand was
like off a dirt bike.
Yeah. Or like she fell and her hand was like under her chest.
Yeah.
Back of the hand forward.
Mm-hmm.
And she landed flat on it.
Just on some very sharp rocks.
Did not try to put her hand out to stop her. Also equally suspicious because generally, even in states of inebriation, unless you're very, very inebriated, it's an automatic reflex. You try to put your arms out in front of you to try to break your fall.
Exactly. And when I was looking at this, I originally thought it was also like some sort of chemical burn mark, something like that. Something you might find in like a meth house if they're making it. You got chemical burn, something like that. But I don't know how, I don't think we can make that determination based off the fact that nobody ever said that she was ever caught up in that sort of lifestyle.
Right, she was using it, not making it, and I don't believe that either Garland or the others were involved with the making and the processing of it.
Yeah, I never saw anything about any manufacturing type thing that was stuck on to.
Yeah, because if this party house was also was Breaking Bad, they would have investigated. You would definitely know if that little house was a meth house, like it was being processed there, because it would be stankin'.
Oh yeah, and also your meth house would not be your party house either.
No,
that's a straight business house.
Right.
You're gonna party somewhere else. You're gonna leave the guy over there that's cooking the meth.
I think the most suspicious part about the hand injuries is that they weren't bloody.
Mm-hmm.
The hand was not bloody, as in blood was not running out of it. Although there was some blood found around her pinky fingernail.
Which means that this injury was cleaned off at some point in time.
That's exactly what I think. I think that she did sustain these injuries to whatever. Could have been the fall.
Mm-hmm.
There was a time when I kind of thought they looked like little punctures, like a dog might have bit her hand.
Yeah, I actually took a screenshot of it, and then I tried to draw
like a patterns
on here just to come up with something matching patterns. Maybe something like you'd say like a dog, but it was too hard. I couldn't do it.
Just a theory I had in one of my initial looks at it. But they are wounds that would have bled.
Mm-hmm.
And even
Obviously.
even in the photos after her death, they look fresh.
Yeah.
Like they occurred very recently before her time of death.
Absolutely.
They aren't like the hard, rough looking scabs. They look like they happened like very recently. Like they would still be red and like hot and maybe itchy.
Because I saw several people that said, well, these are probably, meth marks. You have like a tweaker that's like scratching and picking a lot. And I did see a lot of that when I worked in law enforcement, but typically, you could have it on the hands, arms.
Yeah, but not
a lot on the face.
Yeah, not that condensed though. There's many in one spot.
Yeah,
and nowhere else on her arms.
Not like this. I've never seen anything that looked like this as far as like meth source.
Yeah, and I'm coming into that and fully knowing that I have, somewhat limited expertise, knowledge about that, but I did see it all the time. And it does not look like that to me at all.
It never looked like that. And then also a good point that, the blood around the fingernail indicates that not only are these injuries fresh, but either while she was alive or after she died, she or someone else cleaned these off.
Yeah, they were wiped off.
Yeah.
And they didn't get it all because she has the blood around her pinky nail, but there's no wound to the pinky nail.
Mm-hmm. And then
in fact, the closest one is a few inches away.
Right.
So it looks like she sustained these injuries. The blood ran down her hand.
Yep.
Somebody cleaned it off. That's what it looks like to me.
Mm-hmm. And then you have the bruise on the left wrist. It looks like two different bruises on the left wrist. That could be from
getting grabbed.
It could be from getting grabbed. It could be from hitting it against something. Who knows? I mean, We don't know, but we do know that these injuries are there. And from what I understand, these were not present injuries the last time her family saw her, which goes exactly into what we were talking about, that they were fresh.
They happened shortly before her death. Was she barefoot or in stocking feet?
Barefoot.
Yep. So sometime between the rumored tearing out her shoelaces and saying she's going to do it, she also no longer is wearing socks.
Yeah, so that was one of the things I was going to bring up when we got kind of into the crime scene photo that shows her kind of hanging on this post. Is that her shoes are not in the photograph, but according to the police reports and the research, the shoes were found like 5 or 6 feet away from her final resting spot without the shoelaces in them. Also, I don't believe she had socks on. I don't want to say yay or nay on that now that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, I don't have a clear answer either.
Yeah, but we know that she has her shoes next to her person, which would mean that however many hours before, when she ripped the shoelaces out of her shoes, she did not put them back in.
And she carried them with her.
And she carried her shoes with her, or she wore her shoes without the shoelaces. And I know these are the low top Chuck Taylors.
Yeah.
They're the red low top Chuck Taylors. So the tongue on those things goes all the way almost to the plastic toe.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, pretty much it would be extremely difficult to walk around in these shoes without shoelaces in them.
Yes.
But I'm also
That-
kind of going, maybe that's not relevant, but
No, I'm thinking it is, because if you try to put your feet into those and walk around, they're going to flop right off.
yeah, they're going to fall off. So would it make sense that somebody threw the shoes next to her after? Maybe.
Or going with the idea that she was walking around with these shoelaces, just hanging out, waiting for the moment, and just carrying her other shoes and her purse.
And her purse, just walking around and just walking laps in the driveway,
Yep.
for 5 hours,
And it's
6 hours.
rocky dirt, could be burrs and stuff, just barefoot. Were there any injuries to her feet? I don't believe there are. That's never mentioned.
No, never mentioned. But
So we know she wasn't walking around outside for a long length of time, because she would probably have scratches, maybe some light punctures, some abrasions to
Yeah,
her feet is what I'm
something.
saying. That'd be something worth mentioning, even in a preliminary autopsy, because, folks, that's all we got.
yeah, and in saying that, I would expect, if that were the case, I would expect her feet to look like what her left arm looked like.
Yeah.
With the marks, with the cuts, with the stuff. I would have expected that, but they don't show that. They show the arm, which makes me believe that there were no injuries to her feet.
Right. It'd be, like I said, definitely be worth mentioning, because that would imply that she was walking around outside for the length of time necessary to gain injuries like that. So without knowing that, we can assume there aren't injuries. That's what I'm coming to.
Mm-hmm. But let's go ahead and jump into the murder or suicide kind of theories, because we're already kind of towing that line right now.
You know it.
But there are some things that I think that should be brought up. Now, as far as the suicide goes, is it possible that somebody, and as I mentioned in part one, if you look at the photo, if you can kind of stomach it, the face is blurred out, but this is one of the kind of crime scene photos that I kind of really feel they kind of gives you some perspective on what happened. So if you can stomach it, look it up, and you can kind of follow along as we're talking about it. But in my opinion, could a suicide be carried out in this manner? Yes, it could.
Sure.
It absolutely could. People have done it before, and it's happened before. It'll happen again. I don't think it's very common to use a mailbox, but in my experience, would it be for, say, a doorknob, a door in general, something low to the ground that you can tie something on, and you don't necessarily want to hang yourself in a way that most people think. You want to be able to tie something to a fixed object and then use your body weight against that object to make yourself pass out, not being able to release the tension, and then you pass out and then pass away.
Right. Yeah.
That is common. That is a way that people have committed suicide. But the thing that throws me off about this is that there's just a lot of things that seem a little out of place to me. But staying on the line of the suicide, I would think that in this position, you could, based off the picture we have, we don't know how deep the ligature marks go in on the left side of her neck.
Mhm.
We're not privy to that. Because of the way that the picture is blurred out, I can't give you the exact angle of where I think like pressure points, fixed points on her neck would be.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a possibility that you could die in this manner. That the reason that she is seated in the way that she is that it gives her the leverage necessary to cut off the circulation enough to lose consciousness. And then if that pressure is not removed, then she would pass away from the position that she's in. Now, also when I'm looking at this picture, the way that I look at it is that you have the left shoulder up against the post,
Mm-hmm.
and you have the left leg, bent slightly. It's kind of kicked out slightly. And then you have the right leg going straight down, which means that her right shoulder is kind of over the center of her body and she's actually leaning. And the reason that I point this out is because I think this ditch is obviously angled downward.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is the exact leverage that you would need to actually be in a seated position, like sitting on your legs.
Right.
And the only way that you could do this is if you have that leverage. So in the picture, it looks like she literally knelt down next to this. She tossed the shoestrings over the top of the post. She got it all set up right, exactly the way that she needed to. She is in a position where I feel like based off the landscape, you would have to be in to be able to kind of hold your balance where you're at.
Mm-hmm.
and that you could apply enough pressure to lose consciousness.
Right. Yeah, it does look like that. And you can also kind of see underneath the blurred part where the string on this would be her right side. It's not that deep.
No.
It's not that deep at all. When it goes around the front of her throat and heads off to the left side of her body, it's a little deeper, but still not that deep. It's like you can almost see the edge of the shoelace. Now, I've seen the result of people hanging themselves that resulted in death.
Yes.
It's one of the things that I will never forget because I had no idea how deep that rope or whatever they used. I've seen it several times, but the one time I recall the most, you could not see the rope.
No.
It was a whole man's body weight under pulling him down at the neck. This rope was pulled so tightly, it was an inch deep into his neck, and it was the skin and meat of his neck. He was not overweight. He didn't have like a thick neck. It was pulled so tight, the fold was closed.
Mm-hmm.
You had to literally peel it out of him.
Yeah.
It was so deep. And so the fact that we can see the lace, you can see it. It just doesn't look like it was enough to cause death. Like all her weight is sitting against that shoelace, pulling her.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't look like that. She's knelt down, and for all intents and purposes, maybe not the right phrase I should have said there, but she's leaning mostly against the post. Yes, I realize she does have the shoelaces around her neck, and they are somewhat tight. But just from this picture, it doesn't look like that's what caused her death. Because the left side of her chest and her shoulders leaning against the post, so is part of her face.
Yep.
And she's knelt down,
which would take the pressure off of that angle of the shoelace.
Right. Not a whole lot of it, obviously, because you can also see where the lace is kind of, digging in there.
Mm-hmm.
But the first time I looked at this picture, and still kind of now, I don't get the impression that this was enough to like a hanging, like this was her plan all along. Because if it was, why wouldn't she have sat down on her butt?
Yeah.
Which would have caused a much tighter constriction around her airway.
Yep. And then also you have, going back to your point with the shoelace and it going kind of, the ligature marks going deep within the neck, you also have to remember that the blood is still pumping.
Right.
And so I don't know, for lack of a better term, you kind of get that tomato head type look, where the first time I saw someone that hung themselves, it threw me off because the head was so red and swollen out.
Yep.
Because the blood is not
able to escape.
It's not able to escape. And which also causes those ligature marks to look a lot deeper because you have all of that pressure held up in the same spot.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see that here.
No, we realize the picture is blurry, y'all, but it does not look red.
But it would have went down to the bottom of the neck where the lace is.
Absolutely, and you can see that.
And you don't see any of that there. It looks like if this person was strangled, it looks like it was done, and then the instrument that was used, probably if it was these shoelaces, was then removed. And then after her death, sometime later, she was fixed in this position. Now,
there's also the right side of her neck where her hair is kind of like twirled, kind of tangled in the lace, like it wasn't put there by her.
It almost kind of looks like if someone's trying to adjust and get the right angle, and they're looping their hand in through the lace.
Exactly what it looks like. It looks like somebody was trying to get it to look right. And I know this sounds weird to say, but stay with me. If somebody was going to affix a ligature to themselves, to which they were also going to, wouldn't a woman move the hair out of the way?
I would absolutely think so. Yes.
Like they were putting on a necklace.
You're only causing yourself more pain by doing this.
Right.
And I understand that if you're on methamphetamines or Xanax or anything like that, maybe your pain tolerance is a little high.
Sure.
But I don't think this is something that you're going to overlook. The fact that your hair is actually tangled into this shoelace. So as you go to kind of set down further and get the restraint needed to cause you to pass out, you're going to be feeling not only your hair being jerked out, but also the shoelace that's going literally across your top lip and your nose to the pressure, making a further pressure point going back up to the post. But
It's like pulling her head into the post.
yeah.
The way that she's leaned, yeah.
And to me, it almost looks like this is the shoelace was drawn across the face like that for presentation.
Mm-hmm.
It makes it to where the head does not fall forward. It makes it to where the head is looking up forward.
That's right.
To where she is looking out. Because if this shoelace would not have gone across the front of her face, her head would be dropped down.
Absolutely, which would then increase the pressure, definitely causing a strangulation.
Yeah, but you don't have it. Now,
No, she doesn't have the coloring. It doesn't look deep enough, like enough weight was being pulled down on these shoelaces to dig into her neck to cause death.
yeah,
And those just those two things alone, especially the fact that her head isn't swollen and purple.
yep,
At this point, it would be purple and not red anymore.
yeah.
It would have more.
It would look bad.
It would look, it would look ugly.
Yeah,
And it would not be, you would be thankful that the picture is blurry.
yeah.
It's not the way you want to see somebody.
No, and then just the coloration of her neck and her chest, her arms, everything to me just looks like this is a person who is in a prop position,
Mm-hmm.
like that would still be alive.
Yeah.
This person in this photo looks like it's, maybe just a Halloween joke or something. I'm not trying to make light of something. I'm saying this doesn't look natural to me.
No, and for those that aren't gonna look up this picture, I'm looking at this picture right now, and it looks like somebody posing for a picture.
Yes.
At first, it doesn't look like a person is deceased in this photo, and it's weird. Another thing, very weird, the placement of the purse.
Mm-hmm.
So it's said that it was found like between her legs where she's knelt down.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it's probably moved because the postman went to go try to find her ID for when law enforcement arrived there.
Yep.
But that's just weird. Why would she have put it there?
Yeah.
To me, it looks like it was placed there.
Yep.
And because
Like, oh yeah, here's the purse.
Yep. Oh, we can't leave that in my house.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first thing I thought. But wouldn't it be beside her? Maybe with her shoes where she left them? Why would she carry her purse to the place where she was planning on ending it all? It just comes across as kind of weird when you look at it. It looks like somebody was like, "Oh, we just need to."
This looks to me like it's staged.
It does.
Let me throw something else at you.
Yeah.
Okay. If we're talking about a staged scenario,
Mm-hmm.
then that means that one of two things had to have happened. Either A, Jessica was deceased before she was fixed to this post,
Right.
or B, she was put in this position and then killed.
Mm-hmm.
But the second one makes sense to me more than the first one, because if you look at the photo, and if you're not looking at the photo, I'll describe it. As Mike said earlier, there's 3.5 foot of vegetation around this area. Tall grass, weeds, probably stickers, all this. I mean, I can see a weed in the picture. And what gets me about this is that, in my opinion, it would be incredibly difficult to take someone who is already deceased and put them in this position exactly.
In the dark.
In the dark, pitch black outside. And if you look at her clothes, which her parents and her family say that these are not her clothes. I made the point in the first one that they made that statement, but to me, these clothes look like they fit her. Does that mean they're her clothes? Not necessarily.
Right.
But what I'm saying is it doesn't look like someone just found some random clothes lying around and threw them on her.
Yeah.
We also have to remember that just the day before, she was at a thrift store looking for clothes with Garland. So is there a chance that he was like, "Hey, I really like these clothes. Why don't you get them?"
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how that scenario goes down. But what I'm saying is that there is a chance that these are in fact her clothes because they look like they fit her.
They do.
But more specifically, in my opinion, it would be very difficult to get someone in this position who is already deceased. And if you look at her clothes, there is no grass, no weeds, no stickers, no debris of any kind whatsoever on the clothes.
No, they're clean.
They're clean.
Yeah, doesn't look like she was drugged. She didn't look like she fell down, probably after the hand injuries, or maybe that happened during. But even if that's so, there's no blood on the clothes that she's wearing. However, it is believed that blood spatter was found on the shoes.
The shoe, yeah. One of the shoes that was returned back to the family, which good job, because now that you can't use that anymore.
That's right. Yeah. Chain of custody, gone.
Chain of custody's out on that one, but that's the thing that caught me when I started looking at this picture. The thing that jumped out to me, and now that you said that, because of the blood injury, is that a factor that may go into why she changed her shirt? Why this does not appear like a shirt she would wear?
Not just the shirt, but the pants.
Yeah, it is possible.
From dripping, rubbing, like your hand catching on your pant leg. This blue jeans, it would show up.
Yeah, that she got blood on the clothes that she was wearing. She changed into these clothes somehow, and then her death occurred after that. But the thing that threw me off about that is that this does not look like someone who was rolled into a ditch and then fixed to a post, because there's just no way that you could do that, in my opinion, and not have some sort of debris, markings, grass stains, something on the clothes.
I totally agree. How far was this mailbox from the residence?
150 feet?
150 feet.
Something like that.
Right.
Maybe further.
Okay. So this is where my theory comes in.
Okay. Let's hear it.
Totally speculation. But here's what I'm thinking. We know from the preliminary autopsy that she had meth and Xanax in her system. One's an upper, one's a downer.
Yep.
Eventually, they're all downers.
Eventually, yeah, you get there.
But let's say she did have a fight with Garland. And in this scenario, he's there. He's not alibied out.
Yep.
He's there.
I think the alibi is trash anyways, but go ahead.
Right. And she's been, she's taking drugs and she's all wound up, and she gets to the point where she's not deathly ill, but intoxicated to the point where she has little to no motor control, but she's still ambulatory, as in she can still walk.
Yes.
And Garland and the mystery friend, and I'm calling that because I don't know his name. I didn't find it. They're like, whoa, man, she's been acting crazy. She's crashing. They're like, well, we don't want her here anymore because she thinks she's going to do something. At this point, that they can still carry her easily and not drag her because, again, she's still ambulatory. And so they're like, we need to get her out of here. She's kind of going down the river. She's drugged up. Maybe they think she's going to OD, possible. And they're like, we need to get her out of here. And so they put her in clothes that don't show anything on her because she just recently got some. Garland would know where they were, the clothes, I mean, because he was there when they got them. And so they carry her out there, not forgetting the purse or the shoes, or maybe they came back and put them there after. There's really no way to tell. But in this theory,
both would work.
They carry her out there and they take the shoelaces just as she's made the exclamation the evening before, and they make the loop. They set her up there. They kneel her down because, again, she's still somewhat ambulatory. So they're like, yeah, kneel down right here. You're going to be sick. It's fine. That's when they loop it around her poorly because the way her hair is like tucked in there, kind of weird. It looks like somebody did it to her. It does not look like the way somebody would have fixed it to themselves because her hair is all bungled up. And the way that she's leaning against the post because her hips are tilted downward, like angled, like going down the ditch, like you said earlier. And they just lean her there and let gravity take its course.
Yeah. Not having...
In her weakened state, being heavily intoxicated by drugs, it's enough to strangle her. So it's not deep, obviously, because there's no discoloration that we can see. And this is how you could listen to these people, possible suspects, speak with a clear conscience, because they're not the ones that killed her.
Yeah, to them, technically, she did it herself.
That's exactly how that's how people like this operate. I didn't do it. She looks like she killed herself, Never mind the fact that in this theory, they walked her out there to dispose of hers because she can't be dying in the drug house.
Yep.
Because then that house...
Too many questions. They're going to gain access into the house. You got to get her away from the house.
We definitely know the mystery friend's name now. So that's why they got rid of her. They took her out there. She already made that. They're like, man, you know what? She was in a fit of rage saying she was going to kill herself. This is how they would keep their conscience clear. So when they're in front of a camera and they say, I didn't do it, they can mean that to a certain degree. Because to people like this, people that lie and live in like this fringe part of society, where these types of questions matter, and they can say that with a clear conscience, I'm not the one that did it. She did it to herself. Because to them, that is what happened.
Yep.
That's the reality that they put into motion. Because I don't see how she would have spent that much time in the evening walking around barefoot with no feet injuries. She's not dirty. Her hand is not bloody, so the injuries that she sustained are not fresh enough.
It didn't happen in that mailbox area.
Right.
She still had access to wash her hands off, or somebody washed her hand off.
Right, and maybe
not at a mailbox.
No, definitely not at a mailbox. And she was taken outside and disposed of. Possibly put on display? Sure. You could even put that into this theory. I'm just saying that's how they chose to get rid of her. In my opinion, in this theory, they ran out of string. So they had to run it across her face. Because what was their other option? Maybe they thought that she would be found and still be alive.
Yeah.
And it would look like a suicide attempt. Now that theory's out of the way, let's look at it from the other way. She did do it to herself and thought that if she passed out with that string like that she would be found before she perished. It's just tight enough from what very little we can see in that photograph that she could have strangled.
Yep.
But maybe she did do it in this scenario, and she did pass out and eventually succumb to death, but that wasn't her intent.
Sure.
To kill herself. Maybe she was trying to make an outcry.
Yeah.
Like suicides generally are. Except, unfortunately, she did succumb to death.
Yeah.
If you want to look at it in both sides, which we try to do.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's probably someone screaming at us right now, but no, we're just saying, in this theory, there's two different sides to it. And that is, in my opinion, that's one of those things, because I was kind of thinking about, okay, well, is there a possibility that in this argument, after her shoelaces were already supposedly out of her shoes, or they had removed the shoelaces from her shoes, is there a scenario that plays out where she's in the car with mystery friend and Garland, and they are leaving, or he's going to take her home, he's going to go somewhere, he's going to do something, and then as this argument goes, he starts to strangle her. They stop the car, they're close by the mailbox, and then, this is where the final, your final scene is right here. I don't know how exactly she gets to this point, but I can see where you're saying that, yeah, if this was sort of an outcry attempt, the kind of to where it looks like there was a suicide attempt, hoping somebody would find her.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would. Now, you would also have to be thinking to yourself that this person was, realizing they're going to have to sit there for 5-6 hours before anybody finds them. Maybe not. Maybe they're not thinking about it clearly. But in my opinion, how she ends up at this mailbox is obviously the biggest mystery, whether it is intentionally or she was murdered, because in my head, I just can't get to how that goes through. Your theories, I think, is good because it explains that, yes, because she is still able to walk, they can get her to this location.
That's right. Yeah.
With limited or no debris on the body, anything like that, where it looks like she is still fully intact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that makes sense. Because I don't see another way that you could get somebody there after they're already deceased.
Yeah,
without having anything on the body whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. I mean, she's not real big.
No.
Two grown men. One at the
get
shoulders, one at the feet. I see that as a possibility. In which case she would have perished elsewhere and was carried out there to get as much distance from the home. And they're walking out there and they're like, I don't know where we're going to put her. Like, oh man, she said she was going to kill herself with them there shoelaces. What do we got laying around? Well, it's too dark to walk out into the woods.
Yep.
And we're maybe, but I got a mailbox at the end of the driveway with some tall grass around it. Seems very convenient.
Yeah. And maybe I'm not seeing the whole picture because I have too many kind of gray areas, but the way that I was trying to make this work in my mind is that she was killed at the house by strangulation, and then she was taken out to the mailbox to get away from the house, and she was fixed to the mailbox, and somehow they were able to get her in this position. But where I kind of abandoned that theory is when I saw her clothes and how clean they were. But maybe there's a missing piece that I don't have that can kind of get us to that point.
Yeah, we just kind of did it right there. Say it did happen in the house. He comes out to his buddy and he's like, yo, we need to get her out of here.
Yeah, she can't be in the house.
Yeah, what happened? Man, she died.
She got crazy on me and I strangled her.
And I choked her, but now she's not waking up. And they're like, whew, can't happen in here, buddy. There's way too much paraphernalia.
Yeah.
And so
Burglary tools in here. There's paraphernalia, a bunch of stolen goods.
14 toolboxes in my garage. And 2 grown men probably could carry her.
Under the influence of methamphetamines?
Oh,
absolutely.
Sure. Yeah, they definitely could. They're like, we're going to get her out of here. What are we going to do with her? Man, I don't know. But
y'all remember that story I told y'all about the guy that was on meth that I fought that was half my size that almost whooped me?
Mm-hmm.
Meth drink's a real thing.
It is, because their body isn't receiving the signals of fatigue.
Yeah.
And so they're operating at 100% until they're taken down.
Yes.
Yeah. And
so that's a possibility. I mean, 2 grown men could have done that. But like I said, there's a lot of gray areas that we don't know about. And I think that's where, as soon as I start thinking about it, my mind automatically tells me that it's not possible because of X, Y, Z.
Right. And my original
we just don't know it.
Right. But my original theory is because she's knelt down in a very natural position with her lower legs folded under her upper legs and her butt.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it looks like to me.
Yep.
Like she knelt down, or somebody had her kneel down there, or she did it herself, but
not knowing what the outcome was going to be.
Right.
Obviously.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's tired. She's distressed. She's high on drugs. In my first theory, and then they're just like, she's way out of it, barely conscious, but still ambulatory. And they're like, yeah, come out here. We're just going to, oh man, you're going to be sick. We'll just take you out here. You can throw up in the weeds. And oh, now you're going to stay here.
Yeah. And then there's another thing that I was trying to get past, where what would the motive be? What would be the reason to kill her? And to be honest with you, in a situation like this with the drug involvement and kind of in the people that are involved in this specific situation, I don't think there has to necessarily be a good one. People get killed all the time for little to no reason.
That's right.
There's no reason to think that this could not have been a situation like that.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, from after everyone leaves the party to her body being found, any number of things can happen. It's all unknown. Not my favorite part of true crime is not knowing. Of course, that's what keeps us coming back here. But who knows what she could have said? She could have. A lot of times, in my experience, what really sets people off is threatening them with telling somebody of authority.
Right.
So they're there.
Yeah, she makes the comment like, I'm gonna go to the cops and I'm gonna tell them exactly what y'all are doing here.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, no, you're not.
And they're like, nope, no, you're not.
That ain't gonna be happening
She's
today.
like, that's the only way I can help you. If that's what I got to do, that's what I'll do. And he says no.
Yeah, that's not. And that's, I don't know. I kind of feel like, as we've talked about this and as we've kind of gone into detail, like you just said, I think we can sit around and we can speculate for a while about things that happened and didn't happen. But the way that I land on this thing is that there are things, in my opinion, that look like, yes, this could be a suicide. But I feel like there are more things that point to her being killed by someone, and perhaps however the scenario plays out, that she was placed kind of in this spot based off the picture.
I agree.
Based off the picture, it looks like the ligature marks, the way that it's all set up, it doesn't look to me like a Dr. Godwin, right?
Yeah, that's right. Dr. Maurice Godwin, I believe.
That he kind of pointed out that it wasn't deep enough, that it's not enough pressure. I'm not saying that that's 100% correct, because I can't see the other angle of the body.
Yeah.
I don't know. It could be super deep on that side. I don't know the way that the body is kind of positioned on there, where the exact pressure points would be or not be.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'm just not looking at the picture correctly. And, I reached out to one of my buddies that works crime scene, as I mentioned in the last episode, and I had him look at it. And that's one of those things where he was looking at it and he's like, man, based off the information that we have, there's just too many unknowns for me to say, yes, this could have, because he was kind of in the same boat. There's things that look like, yeah, man, maybe it's this way or maybe it's this way. But we don't have enough as far as the pictures go to nail it down.
Right. Yeah. And unfortunately, those answers will never get done because, due to unfortunate, financial restraints, she had to be cremated so she could be put to rest like she deserves. So the preliminary and the drug screen is all we got.
That's all we got.
You didn't have somebody there to take a deeper look because it was written off as a suicide, which is believed to be because she's in the world of drug users.
Yeah, and the only reason that we have the photograph from the mailbox is because, from what I understand, it was taken by the mailman that was at the scene, and then the picture of her arm was taken by a relative that went to identify her or saw her body before the cremation.
Wow.
And then you had her clothes and all of the evidence. You know, the shoelaces are lost.
Mm-hmm.
The shoes have been returned back to the family.
Mm-hmm.
The purse has been returned back to the family. And the clothes that she was wearing on the night that she died have been burned.
Yep.
So literally we have nothing else to go off of based off that. And honestly, I believe unless you have people that get into a situation where they feel like they need to talk,
Mm-hmm.
we're not going to know exactly. I mean, I think we can speculate all the day long, but we're just
as we will.
As we will and as we do, because maybe in talking about this gets somebody else's, juices flowing, thinking about different, like alternative ways on how this can happen. And if you do, reach out to us and let us know maybe what your thought is on what could have happened to her. Because like I said, I can see it both ways based off of the limited amount of pictures and evidence we have to go off of. But honestly, I feel like because of the way it was set up, it maybe leans more towards that she did not do this to herself. Where are you at?
I'm going to tell you straight up that I do not believe that this was a woman that was going to kill herself. I don't. And it all comes down to one thing, and that's the message. She implied she was going to see her son again soon.
Yep.
That's not, in any time I've seen suicides, it's never, they often do leave notes.
Yep.
And that's never it. You never say that, man, I'll see you later. And then you go and gank yourself. You don't. That's not, and that's not really how it works. You say something like, it's all vague.
Yeah.
It's all part of an outcry. I'm not saying that all suicides are like that. I'm just saying more often than not, if you're going to kill yourself, you say and do things that make it look like you're not going to be around.
Yeah. There's only one I can think of where it was 100% completely out of the blue. No one had any idea. Most of the people that you talk to after somebody has committed suicide, family, close friends, things like that, a lot of times they point out things that maybe they overlooked. The signs,
Mm-hmm.
the things like that. Oh man, I should have known this. I should have known that. Those were present in pretty much every single suicide that I ever dealt with. There was only one.
Mm-hmm.
It was literally 100% out of the blue. Nobody knew, but it was coming off an event that was kind of like a domestic violence type thing.
Mm-hmm.
So you can tie it, you could get there. You could tie it in with that.
Yeah.
It was all simultaneous.
Yeah. It makes it a little more extreme.
Yeah. So that even kind of goes into that group
Mm-hmm.
with different signs. So I think as far as this case in general goes, I don't really know if we can add anything further.
No, we're going to do that thing where we start talking in circles.
Yeah, I think you're right. And and then it just starts to get more confusing and everybody's like, why are they still talking about this? Like,
Yeah.
why are they saying this again?
They're like, yeah, man, you already said that. And I know I've already probably done that several times as well. But yeah, I don't think that this was a suicide. I do think that it's suspicious. And I can only hope that someday somebody admits it.
Yep.
Or something that was overlooked gets found. And that's all we can hope for.
Yeah, I agree. I think that unless something happens where someone comes forward, we're not going to know. Or if there's if somebody analyzes the evidence maybe in a different way. And like I said, we only got these pictures because they were taken by people who were not in law enforcement and they were leaked out to the public.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, we would have nothing to go off of. And probably we wouldn't even be talking about this case because we would have no visual of what we're actually looking at.
Yeah, but
having that picture took it to a different level.
Right. And her family talking about it because it's suspicious to all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the majority of the people that are around, I mean, I think there's only a handful of people that feel like this may be a straight up suicide. I mean, even on Reddit, I read some people that were like, no, this is most definitely a suicide, but I don't know. It's very suspicious to me. I don't know how you could say for sure it was a suicide.
Mm-hmm.
Are you saying like, no, this is 100% for sure a suicide? Like, folks, we weren't there.
Yeah.
We're telling stories right now. We're trying to get to the bottom of things. We're looking into things. We're doing stuff like that. But I don't think you could ever, I would never say, I know for a fact.
Right.
That this is what, Maybe I will someday. Maybe I will say that.
Yeah, maybe.
You never know. But one of the things I'd like to go ahead and do at the end of the episode is, if you remember in the last debrief episode, I said, please go on to Apple Podcast, leave us some reviews, do some things like that.
Let's get them.
And thank you guys so much who went on there and hit the 5 stars and left a review. Or we had several people that just hit the 5 stars. Hey, that's fine too.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
show some love, however.
That's right. We'll take it all.
Yeah. So if you haven't done so, we were able to jump up, I think, by 10-ish reviews and 5-star ratings, which I'm telling y'all, it helps our podcast grow so much as far as being noticed by, the host sites, the Apples, the Spotify's, everything like that. They go off ratings and reviews. That's how they see, like, oh, this is a good podcast or this is a crummy podcast.
Yeah, the algorithms.
Yeah, you got them algorithms. And so they go off this kind of stuff. So please, if you haven't done that and you're listening on Apple, hit the 5 stars, leave us a review, even if it's short and sweet. I've got a few of those on here.
Yeah.
And if you're on Spotify, hit that 5 stars. Now that I know it's there, I had no idea it was there.
Yeah.
So now we can say, hit them 5 stars on Spotify too.
Tell us what you think. You know what? Even message us.
Yeah. Send us a message. Get on there. I've got more episodes out. You and I, we have more episodes on the show than we have followers on Instagram.
Yeah.
So if you want to head over there, give us, show us some love there. Facebook, whatever.
We get some more attention there. We start to put more stuff on there.
Yeah. Yeah.
We gotta have the interest. I'd love it.
Yeah, we definitely want to grow this thing and be around for a long time. So make sure and go over there and do that. I don't want to hound you guys about it. I just want to make sure you guys understand the importance of, as far as growing the podcast and stuff. Those are the things that we need from the listeners, and it helps us out so much. And everybody that's gone and done that, thank you so much. Either whether you're on Facebook or Instagram, Twitter, if you're listening on Apple, Spotify, or one of the other many that are out there. Thank you guys so much for showing us some love and listening to the podcast. And if you're listening to the show and you don't know anything to write as the review, then just write what episode you started listening on.
Yeah.
Or how you found the podcast. That's something else I like to know. So, as promised, I am going to read some of the reviews, and I'm not going to talk too much about them, but I am going to explain what I like about it. So, the first one that we had from last week, and I noticed that someone had just left us a review before we started the show, but as far as Apple goes, it takes like 24 to 48 hours to come in, so I'm not going to be able to see it. But you know what? I'm going to give you a shout out on the next one.
That's right.
So the first one comes from, I believe, Texas Core is the way that it's written. I hope I got that right. 5 stars, 2 thumbs up. Justin and Mike have long talked about making their passion for true crime into a reality, and this podcast is it. Both of them bring experience and dedication from being former law enforcement officers and giving the listener an honest and in-depth look into the evidence and an unbiased opinion into the missing link. We appreciate that.
That's very nice. Thank you.
Yeah, we try to do as best we can from an unbiased angle and give you all the facts and details. And then sometimes at the end, we'll give you the what for as far as what we think.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for giving us that one. Next is from Grungy07, hopefully. 5 stars, incredibly entertaining. This is my first crime podcast, but this podcast has set the standard for me. You're both incredibly authentic and supremely knowledgeable about the topics you both discuss. Well, thank you.
Supremely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Both of your life experiences lend a viewpoint and an angle to the stories that cannot be duplicated by any other podcast. I recommend your podcast to anyone who will listen. Thank you for that review, because that really kind of sets it up for Mike. When Mike and I were talking about doing this show, that's exactly what we wanted to do.
That's right.
We wanted to give you a viewpoint from a couple of beat cops that have been in probably similar situations to something like this, and kind of explain the processes of how the investigation works, or the courts, or anything like that. Anything we can give to you guys that kind of further explains the processes and how decisions were reached, or whatever the case may be. That's what we kind of felt we could bring to the table, using that experience to explain how those things happen.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for that review. These reviews mean the world to us. Mike and I love reading them, because it kind of lets us know that, that people are listening to the show and they like the content we're giving.
I'm feeling extra grateful, because this is the first time I'm hearing most of these.
Yeah. I kept these a secret from Mike, so we can do them live.
Yeah, it feels good.
Next one is from Jen ! Jen M. It says, I love this podcast. And then it says, this is a great podcast, 5 stars. And short and sweet.
Boom.
Boom. That's
Nailed it.
I said, if you want to just be short and sweet and just put, hey, it's a great podcast. Literally, someone did that.
Yep. Jen exclamation M. Equally nice. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Beast 2468 says, best crime podcast around. 5 stars. They get into the meat and taters on this one.
That sounds like a good old boy right there.
That's a Texan right there.
That's right.
That's a good old boy right there. If you use the word taters, that's a good old boy right there.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So next one is from Misi Jesse, I believe is the way you pronounce that. Debriefing brings it to a whole new level. I listen to this 5 stars. I listen to true crime podcast on a daily basis. I'm subscribed to a handful of favorites. The debriefing brings the storytelling to a whole new level. Going deeper into the investigation and court cases really helps understand how justice is served. Also, thank you so much, because that is the point of what we want to do.
Huge.
What we set out to do from these reviews, it looks like that is what we're doing.
Misi Jesse, thank you so much.
Yeah, and then the next one is from K. Grandori.
Yeah.
Yeah, K. Grandori. Great insight, 5 stars. I really like the format. I enjoy getting the details of the case first, forming my own opinion, and then getting to hear their thoughts. I also think they do a great job looking at each case objectively. I just discovered the podcast and can't wait to see how the podcast continues to develop.
Oh, you know it, K. Grandori.
Yeah, we want to keep this thing moving. And thank you so much for that, because again, somebody said objectively, that's what we're trying to do. And then of course, giving you the part 1 where I give you the facts and information. Part 2, we come in and break it down. I noticed that most people listen to both episodes, but I know there are some people out there that listen to the part 1. They get all the info and they're out.
Yep.
And the reason why we set it up that is because we know there's some people that cannot stand banter.
Right.
And there's some people that want to know the details of the case. Then they want to break it down. They don't want to talk about it as the case is unfolding, because sometimes it's easy if the hosts get off track a little bit to try to come back.
Mm-hmm.
But if you know all the details in the beginning, before we start our part, you're already a leg up.
That's right.
And that's exactly why we did the show the way that we did it. And thank you so much for giving us that review, because that kind of tells us that we're heading in the right direction.
Come for the facts, stay for the banner. That's what I say.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we love doing it this way, and we'll continue to do it this way as long as everybody still listens to the show. We really like the input. We really like for people to tell us if there's things that we need to change. If we feel like it is a need, then we'll do it.
Absolutely.
I mean, we're here to put on a good podcast. We want to make sure that this show continues on for a long time. We want to grow. We want to get better. We're doing different things to try to make that happen. And we thank you guys so much for being along on the ride. And if you are just joining us, welcome. And I hope you guys go back and listen to all the podcasts.
Please do. Some of those earlier episodes are bangers.
Yeah, they're bangers. Now, I will say, I heard someone is like, yeah, listen to the first one. It sounds like a little weird. I'm like, yeah, I know. Because let me go ahead and just say, if you go back and listen to maybe 1 through 6,
yeah,
not counting the debriefs. So 1, 3, 5, and maybe 7 was when I was still recording them in my laundry room, during the middle of the night. So it's kind of got a lower vibe, where I was kind of just sitting back there talking like this.
Yeah.
I understand that may not be the best thing that we could have done.
We had to start somewhere, buddy.
But we had to start somewhere. We were just basically doing this, it was just off the cuff, man. We just did it. And we're learning as we go. And I'm not going to take those episodes down.
Heck no.
I mean, I know that some people are like, man, our first episode sucked. And so we removed them. And my thought is, hey, everything is a growing process.
That's right.
So if you want to see how the podcast has grown in almost a year, you can go back to episode 1 and listen, episode 2 and listen, and then come up, because next episode's the big 5-0.
Oh, man, so exciting.
We're about to hit 50.
And we're about to do a 2 Not Cops.
Yeah, so I want to keep it there, because you can literally see how this podcast is evolving over the time. And I want everybody to have that reference point, because if you're someone that wants to start a podcast and you're like, man, I don't know what I'm doing, I would just say, well, just do what we did.
Yeah.
Figure some things out, and then...
Because guess what? We didn't either.
Yeah, we had no idea.
Yeah.
We just did the thing. We really wanted to do it, so we did.
We're just a couple of dudes.
Yeah, just a couple of just average Joes.
just Joe Q Public.
Yep. And now that we're almost a year into this thing, we love it. We want to keep doing it, and we hope that you guys will stick with us and enjoy the ride.
Absolutely.
So, all right, that's gonna do it for this episode.
Sure
we will
is.
talk to you guys later. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening to this episode of The Murder Project. Our numbers are going up, our downloads are going up, and we have you guys to thank for that. If you're looking for us on any of the social media platforms, you can find us on Facebook. We're at The Murder Project. If you need to search for us, you can type in facebook.com/podcasttmp. If you're looking for us on Instagram, we are at The Murder Project. And if you're looking for us on Twitter, we are at The Murder Pod. Also, don't forget, go over to whatever platform you're listening on, like and subscribe to the show if it will let you. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, go ahead, click that 5 stars, let us know you're listening. If you're on Apple Podcasts, hit the 5 stars and also leave us a review. We would appreciate it very much, and we thank everybody that has already done that. If you have any longer form questions or comments, you need to get a hold of us. We have an email address. That email is contact@themurderproject.com. And as always, Mike or myself will get back to you. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening to this episode. We look forward to speaking to you again in the future. But before we go, please remember,
Head up, eyes up,
and stay alive.